And on Saturday there will be a protest in Sydney. In Darwin today, people suffering under the intervention, speaking out against the intervention, adding their voices to a listing of books and even government research which shows that people are against the Northern Territory intervention. We are protesting the day after Unions NT, Sticks and the CFMEU's endorsed a petition was presented by our Senator Seward in Parliament calling for award pay for Aboriginal workers who have worked for $4 an hour plus basics card alongside white award-waged workers in construction projects in the Northern Territory.
I'm here for the same reason as you guys, to support this. And I'm no one, I'm a mum. I happen to be a descendant of the originals of this country, and I'm sick of government. I'm sick of the controllers. Who eats that day? 30,000 children die of poverty all up somewhere. 1 in 7 people earn less than $1 a day. That's global, but here we have a chance to stand up for the originals here. And I don't see enough people, and I come to these events and I never see enough people. I wonder when Australia's going to wake up and stand up for our brothers and sisters here, just here and then everywhere. Because I don't believe we can go on much longer.
Well, we're here to mark 4 years since the introduction of the Northern Territory intervention. 4 years of one of the most racist, disgusting government policies that has ever been introduced into this country. When the intervention came through 4 years ago, it was introduced on the back of a lie. They said the Aboriginal communities, Aboriginal men were child abusers, that there were pedophile rings, that every Aboriginal community was rife with this sort of degradation. It was exposed to be a lie, and they used this to bring through a policy that was not about helping Aboriginal people, but all about dispossessing them of their land, all about attacking the gains from the land rights movements of the 70s and 80s. And we're here to take a stand against that.
Julia Gillard has said that it would be a wonderful thing to recognise the ongoing culture that is Aboriginal culture in the Australian Constitution, whilst at the same time she's preventing children from learning their own language.
So I'm on the Regional Council of the Manufacturing Workers Union, the print division, and I often take along various issues, and one of the things I took along was a Jobs with Justice campaign. And of all the things I've taken to the Regional Council, I've never heard such outrage in bringing that along. That this is an argument we can win amongst the broader community. People understand the basic outrage of having people work for the basic card, work for rations. In the same way that unionists can support the equal pay campaign of the ASU or can support low-paid cleaners, they also understand the outrage of treating Aboriginal people in this manner.
I think it's important that people realise that there's protests that are happening around the country at the moment, and that there's been ongoing resistance, as we've talked about, from Aboriginal communities and Aboriginal leaders themselves, and particularly those communities in the Northern Territory who have been fighting so bravely to maintain their rights and to maintain their connection to the land. And I think it's very important that we're all here today to show support for them and to stand up and say no more. 4 years too long. This intervention has gone on for too long. Because I think as well that it's a racist intervention that has been deliberately constructed to destroy these communities, and this has been the intention all along from the Howard government to start with, but that racism has been continued deliberately by the Gillard government. And I think the contempt that Julia Gillard had for Aboriginal people in the Northern Territory was just demonstrated so clearly in her recent visit there, where she ignored any complaints coming from, legitimate complaints coming from Aboriginal elders, where she tried to actually constrain the media debate around the issue and to
my name's Sam. I'm from the National Union of Workers. We're a union that organises a lot of low-paid workers here in Australia, around the country, but none as low-paid as the Aboriginal people in the Northern Territory on the Basics card. This is absolutely a union issue, and it's a blight on Australia that our Aboriginal brothers and sisters up in the Northern Territory are paid such appalling wages and really treated like second-class citizens. I think everybody here who's a member of their union should go back to their union, call their organiser, tell them that this is an issue you care about, this is a workers' issue, and this is something that we all need to get behind together. So thank you for coming along, and thanks for having us.
All right, thanks everybody for coming. On the nice day to condemn the horrible, racist Northern Territory intervention. It's been going on for 4 years, and it's 4 years too long. You can even tell how racist it is because they had to suspend the Racial Discrimination Act in order to bring in these laws. We've come up with 4 things that are wrong with the Northern Territory intervention. One big one is the loss of control of communities. Land rights that have been won over decades have now been wound back as community councils have been taken away. Adequate funding has been denied to promote Indigenous communities. They're saying they'll only fund a small number of hub towns, so most people get left out. The second big thing that's been wrong with the intervention, it hasn't closed the gap at all despite the government propaganda. Even the government's own statistics say that imprisonment's up by 30% rather. School attendance is down, suicide, self-harm, malnutrition are all up. And we've also had the terrible slave wages where people have been working for $4 an hour doing construction work and things like that. The third big thing that's wrong with the intervention is things like cultural attacks, cuts to bilingual education. These are endangered languages. These are some of the most ancient languages in the world, and the government said, no, we're not really going to give you adequate resources to learn in your own language. But most fundamentally, the big fourth thing wrong with the intervention is that it's taking away Indigenous people's right to control their own affairs, which is just a crying shame. As a result of these things, it's been condemned by a wide number of groups, church groups, unions, the United Nations, the Greens. So we also need to come out today and say this has gone on for too long. We need to really listen to what Indigenous communities want and then start funding that adequately.
I'd just like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people, the traditional owners, and who fought from day one against the invasion, the same as Aboriginal people are fighting all over Australia. I live in Geelong with my Aboriginal family, and I belong to the Shetland Islands. My people were colonised by the Scots. We're from the Vikings. We're all pretty much colonised, but we've become part of the problem here in Australia. This is one of the most racist countries in the world, and they've got this veneer of being egalitarian. Aussie's got this great, we're supposed to be one of the most egalitarian countries in the world. And I have to say, I'm here as a rank and file CFU member, and I'm proud to part that the CFU has taken part. My old union, the Seamen's Union, the Maritime Union of Australia, they've always been involved in walking alongside Aboriginal people, but it's about time they stepped up a bit. You know, the fact is that unions here are they've got great policies, the same as the bosses, but it's all up on the wall. We need rank and file members on the streets. We don't need just, you know, tokenism from some union leaders, because tokenism is very, very cheap. We can all say things and pass resolutions, but we've got to get workers on the street to support Aboriginal people. We've got to get workers to go on strike to support Aboriginal people. The fact is that Aboriginal people are working for slave wages in 2011 is a complete disgust. They haven't been paid wages all their lives, Aboriginal people. And don't forget, this government, and they've only been in just a few months, the first thing they've done was not acknowledge the Wurundjeri people. It's the first thing they've done. This government does not acknowledge that this land has been stolen from Aboriginal people. At least the other mob before them acknowledged that this was Wurundjeri land. That was very clearly, it's an attempt to make sure that Aboriginal people are going to have to fight again to get acknowledged on their own land.
My name's Keith. I'm a member of the Indigenous Social Justice Association in Melbourne. Our group works around Aboriginal death in custody and Aboriginal justice in general. And because of the intervention, this will lead to high incarceration rate. As we know, when you have an incarceration rate, high incarceration, you have more Aboriginal death in custody. There's suicides in communities in the Northern Territory because they are so hopeless in support. And if the taxpayers, if they only realised how many hundreds of millions of dollars were spent on this intervention, they'd be knocking the doors down at Parliament. And I guess one will never know how much really went down to the grassroots community, but I guess you'd have to say only a few percent. So where did the rest of the money go? I tell you where it went. Went to managers flying in and out, buying vehicles, administration costs on white bureaucrats. Very little amount of money, only a few percent went to grassroots community, which all their the things they had in place against alcohol abuse, community support, gone, was completely taken over and dismantled.
We've heard even this morning that Jenny Maxson, the Minister, the Indigenous Affairs Minister, she's been on the radio talking about how the Northern Territory intervention has improved the lives of Aboriginal women and children. She's not the only one in this country that's walking around purporting these ideas. There's a tiny minority of people, of Aboriginal people. We've seen Bess Price on Q&A a few months ago, an Aboriginal woman who's living in the suburbs of Alice Springs, who isn't actually subject to the intervention. She's also been around talking about how the intervention has been a good thing for Aboriginal people, and figures like Noel Pearson, especially as well, and a whole series of government documents, reports and articles talk about that the intervention is a good thing for Aboriginal people. And we've seen all the speakers have gotten up today and discussed, and shown very clearly the evidence that shows how this policy is an absolute failure and it's been a disgrace for people in these remote communities. All the indicators, education has plummeted in certain communities, health has been incredibly bad for Aboriginal children, and the CDEP schemes which are slowly being squeezed out, that have been closed down, are forcing Aboriginal people onto welfare queues and Centrelink to actually get their welfare money quarantined on the basics card, and they're actually working for these payments under rations. What we're seeing with this policy is a return to the assimilation agenda that we've seen in the 1930s. These are the very ideas that these seeds of racism that were sown in the foundation of the colonisation of this country, that went around saying that it was something about Aboriginal culture which made people inferior. That was the problem. These are the very ideas that parade around today in respectable language and try and pass, that the government tries to pass off as being for the betterment of Aboriginal people.
Always was, always will be Aboriginal